And I request everyone to please settle down. It's 9:30. So I think I am Vivek Bhardwaj, and good morning to everyone out here. I hope you had your nice cup of tea and coffee, and you are fully awake and present inside the conference. Today we have an interesting lineup of extremely diverse speakers, from equipment to policy people, and the topic that we will cover today is for hydrogen. And as you know that decarbonization, as everyone says, is the path towards human prosperity. And when you talk about decarbonization, then for the last 10 years, silica using solar panels has done a lot of bulwark by doing an extremely well task at decarbonization. The next magic element uh, was sodium and lithium, which brought in the trend of storage batteries. But now the question is that how do you decarbonize extremely tough to do industries? Industries like steel, fertilizers, transport. Is there a magic element like silica or sodium or lithium that can help us decarbonize these hard to decarbonize industries? And for us and scientists over the last many years, they believe that this magic element to decarbonize is hydrogen. It is nothing new, um, but using a extremely well cocktail of renewable energy and hydrogen, uh, there is a possibility to get into an extremely fast decarbonization mode of all these things. And I'm pleased to get a very diverse set of speakers and panelists today. First, I would like to start with Mr. Friggis. I request Mr. Friggis to come and sit. So, Mr. Friggis has been the managing partner of the Budapest office for several years. He has studied in US, Germany, and Hungary, and he belongs to Ronald Berger Strategy, which is doing significantly good work in Europe by introducing cutting edge policies and regulation. They have done extremely well and good work in the buzzword, which is the GOO, guaranteed of origin mechanism, which basically talks about what is green hydrogen in the first place. So we are pleased to get Mr. Friggis out here. Shall I sit? Yeah, please sit. Yeah, thanks. Sit on my place. Okay. Uh, we also have an interesting presentation by Kritika, and I request her to come on stage. Uh, Kritika started almost an year back when the National Hydrogen Mission came. She has been working relentlessly with several investor companies, banks, and she has an extremely well landscaping report that we will launch after Mr. Frigg's session. She has been the managing director and head of power and infrastructure advisory. It's a global emerging market focused investment firm, and they work across emerging markets globally. And she will be walking us through some key insights through a presentation. We also have an extremely diverse set of panelists. I request Arian to please come on stage. Arian leads the business development initiatives for a French company, HDF, which is primarily into the equipment manufacturing space. They have a unique concept of using megawatt level hydrogen fuel cells for the much clear buzzword of RTC power, which has been mostly talked about wind and solar. But Arian gets us a new perspective of using hydrogen for fuel cells. I request the next panelist, Mr. Bimal, to come on stage. Bimal is a very famous name amongst all equipment manufacturers in India. He was earlier with SoftBank, and he's the business head for green energy development for Larsen and Toubro. which is creating turnkey solutions for green hydrogen and its derivatives, which will be like the first of its kind in India. And before that, he has more than 2 decades of diversified experience. Our next speaker is quite unique, Mr. Manjunath. I request you to come on stage. Uh, Mr. Manjunath comes from UL, which is uh, a gold standard for certifications across the world. 10 years back, he worked extensively on certifying solar panels and making sure everyone offers the same product. And now he is on the body of BIS and several selection committees. He is making sure that hydrogen and equipments all go through the same certification process, irrespective of the manufacturer. He is also in several industry certification bodies, giving his valuable input and working on putting up a test lab in India where electrolyzers and piping systems can be certified to be made truly safe as per global norms. And finally, I request our moderator, Mr. Vishwanath, to come. Mr. Vishwanath is the chief executive of Greenstat. He has more than 40 years' experience in the energy sector. He has been associated with NTPC, KPMG, um, and the noteworthy to mention is that he is the program director for Sri Lankan mission, and he gives us an extremely good perspective on what is happening in Sri Lanka and how do they want to take up hydrogen. So, with that, I request Mr. Frigis to come and start his presentation.
Thank you very much. My name is Friedrich Shannon, and I'm so happy to. I would like to bring you a short presentation about our recent experiences. Um, I'm a consultant, so I'm working for the company Roland Berger, which is European origin, German heritage consultancy. I've worked for this company for more than 20 years, mainly focusing on strategy development and 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 investment support, project development. This company is 50 years old, so pretty young, but we're still working on a lot in the energy sector. Recently, I work a lot in hydrogen related topic, but I didn't start it in hydrogen. So 10 years ago, it was not a hot topic like today. So I started in renewable energy. We did a lot of uh, distributed energy strategies, renewable energy strategies, a lot of development in the last 10 years, which happened around the globe, developing renewable energy sources. It was the main focus. And I still remember a couple of years ago, like in the late 2010 years, I had the first interaction with the real new way of thinking about hydrogen that could be a major energy source for the transition of the global climate achieving the global climate targets. That was around 2018, 2019 when we first started to work on hydrogen projects, mainly in Europe, but recently we work along the whole globe. We have also an office here in two offices actually here in India, but we have hydrogen development projects around the globe from US to towards to Japan. So it's a pretty wide scale of activities. But of course, our major and my home turf is of course Europe. When I work with several country governments and companies, major companies, to develop their own hydrogen strategy. We also work here in Asia already for smaller countries, and I hope that we will work also on hydrogen topic here for India as well. I did my homework, so I read the hydrogen strategy of India, which has been published recently, and it's a pretty solid work. It set pretty clearly the objective to achieve the net zero by 2070 and energy independency by 2047. The role is, of course, reflects India position in the region, the global energy hub for production, usage and export as well, for green hydrogen and its derivatives. The mission for this strategy is very clear. Reaching the decarbonization goals. Um, the plan itself. It's very clear of 5 million megatons production of hydrogen, and of course investment almost $100 billion dollars into the sector in the coming 10 years. What it says also, there is four key elements to be further developed, which is, I think, it's essential for each country's strategy development. These four components, of course, how you can manage the demand generation. We have to manage how the demands for green hydrogen is created, how to get the financing behind it, manage all the stakeholders, and kick off some projects. So this is, I'm going to say a few words about that as well. And it has also some stages, which usually all of the strategies have: one, two, four. We have even some strategies with 5 or 6 stages for development. The India strategies is very clear. Let's get ready for the journey, for research and development and building up the competencies, and then making into the execution and make the investments happening. Yes, this is the four elements which has been highlighted, and I think it's very critical uh, uh, to address not just as a list of to-dos, but also what are the key success factors of the successful hydrogen strategies. Demand generation, it's something which typically not coming through to the strategy, because if we develop a strategy, we have to understand what is the demand, and we have to reflect on that with the nice product portfolio and a unique selling proposition. In terms of hydrogen usage for electricity, for mobility, for building efficiency, it's a critical element, because a lot of players not really understand what's the role, what's the key beneficial elements, and how does it should work along the whole value chain. And to be honest, the majority of the discussions is focusing on the problems, the technological problems, the physical problems, the molecules itself, but not really on how we can use efficiently the technology. The other element here is the time perspective. We are not talking about the next year business model. We are talking about business models in 5, 10 years, which is a little bit difficult to understand what we are talking about. And we are not talking about the current benchmark prices and cost. We are talking about the future prices and the future production cost of hydrogen, which also need some guidance for the potential future off-takers, how they should make the business model for themselves. Financial support is the major element which we are discussing everywhere now. How we get financed the project, which like 5, 10 years long, with a lot of uncertainty in the global economy as well. So this is the element when we should create multiple elements for financing, a portfolio of financing, and also make it a transparent and understandable business model for the players and for the finances as well. Governance and stakeholders, we are talking about uh, multi-element cooperation of corporation and the local and national level of bodies, sometimes also global partnerships as well. We have to inform them, we have to empower them, have to support them in order to be a significant part for regulatory, for rules, for creation, the framework, and of course, everybody should live within these frameworks. And the last element, which I usually have a lot of discussion with governments. So we set up everything. We understand what's the model, what's the benefits, how it should work, but how shall we start? And this kickoff project is coming usually from private market players, private companies. They see the fantasy there, they see the return on investment there, and how we can kick off these kind of projects, which along the lot of uncertainties, there needs some subsidies. There is a need for more cooperation and more understanding the business models behind it. Um, so currently, I see we face a lot more questions than answers. As I said, given the nature of the hydrogen industry, it brings a lot of challenges to the players. Uncertainty in the global economy, unclear future acceptance from the stakeholders, currently missing infrastructure, or we would like to use the stranded assets. So this is also a technological challenge here. Um, Very unclear price set, and the levelized cost of hydrogen is still in a lot of cases just an estimate here. Framework and regulatory environment is very fragile, a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of question marks there. So we need a successful framework here. We did recently a kind of analysis, what are the best practices in the legal framework, and we see two different type of approach for this regulatory framework assessment. One is how you can manage the supply, the technological supply, meaning the infrastructure, what you need for hydrogen development. And the second element, the lower part of this is chart, is what you need to run to provide the services regarding to the business operations for hydrogen usage. Um, what you see overall the globe, there is a very good practice from the government or the subsidies bodies that they provide a lot of funds and grants and some cases direct investment, co-investments. There is a lot of opportunities with tax breaks and optimization of special zones supporting the investments. These are happening already in the major countries, in the developed countries, where they understood the role of the subsidies is a significant part, not fully subsidize the investment, but making a matching, making a future price guarantee for the suppliers supporting the off-takers, or providing a kind of support for the off-takers to get an understanding of a future price level they can accept the hydrogen in their business ecosystem. But it's still a very um, unique and sometimes very complex way of supporting these activities. And what we realized that where it could be a successful operation for hydrogen development projects is so-called the hydrogen ecosystem. You might have heard about the term hydrogen valleys. This is the definition of a business cooperation of several stakeholders. It's a kind of the current or the next generation level of cooperation of the key participants of hydrogen value chain. Um, it's it's a kind of a small little economy itself. It's not closed, but tend to be a closed circle of production, storage, transportation, and end usage of the hydrogen. And it's useful to have this closed mini economics to understand the market players, and also for the financing bodies and the regulators to understand how does it work, where the money comes to this ecosystem, how it creates value, and what is the potential benefits of these ecosystems. But it's not just about money. Of course, economics is the major part of it, but it's also two other elements which you can see here. Is of course the overall goal is the environmental goal, uh, reflecting the climate policy, reducing the local emissions, and of course improving the quality of life. The other element is social. The social has two different aspects, which is very important, making it a secure and understandable technology source. Hydrogen, it's still considered in some countries and some places a dangerous material. Of course, it needs some security measurements to contain the hydrogen in the right place, but also understanding how does it work, and also providing an understanding how we can use it. You might have also discussions um, mixing some of the normal people outside of our hydrogen community. What is the difference between a hydrogen fuel cell electric car and a normal battery-based electric car? It's not so obvious for everybody. Uh, I'm speeding up. What's the element of this hydrogen wallet is described here. Here are some showcases around the globe from from Europe to Australia. We have seen a lot of hydrogen valleys already in concept after the feasibility study, and also about starting the operation. More than 36 hydrogen valleys we have analyzed. I'm not going to into details what is a hydrogen valley. I've just described it. What is the current status of kind of this mini economics? All of them, almost all of them, focusing on green hydrogen, majority using PEM electrolyzers, majority has a storage and a transportation element, of course, in itself. Almost more than 80% focusing on mobility end users, and just half of them has an industrial off-takers like chemical industry and similar. Altogether, all of this almost 40 hydrogen well is currently covering up 30 billion euro investment case. What is everybody's interested on is, of course, what is the average cost of hydrogen? It's about 6 euro per kilogram. The best cases which I have seen is about 2 to 3, and the worst is about 8 to 10 euro. One interesting element is that how competitive currently this value proposition, and you see that almost or even more than 1/3 of the leaders of these companies believe that this business model is very competitive. Nevertheless, it's still a long way to go for development. I will talk about later about the typical types of hydrogen valleys in the panel discussion maybe. But the last comment which I would like to say here is the European framework for subsidies, which is a huge development recently happened. Just one comment here, you see RRF is the Resilience and Recovery Fund, providing several hundred billion euros, not just for hydrogen, but for all about renewable energy. For hydrogen, as a description, to achieve at least 25% of this total investment. You see IPCEI, it's a common European interest project development. It's a special granting mechanism approved currently more than 10 million euros for hydrogen, international hydrogen projects just for development in the European Union, like Blue Danube and similar projects. Just Transition Fund and Cohesion Funds is the general climate fund from Europe. ETS Innovation Fund is where we get the tax from the polluting companies and refurbished to the hydrogen project. It's the Innovation Fund. It's a very interesting auction system which you can get back almost 40 billion euro to get back to the hydrogen ecosystem coming from the pollution tax. Clean hydrogen partnerships, it's not a funding, it's not a fund, but it's much more a cooperation of more than 300 companies interested, energy companies interested in the energy, hydrogen energy usage. And this is a platform we can share and discuss the development and the future targets. And the last one is the European Hydrogen Bank. This is a bank, it's a very small bank, and the aim is not to finance, but provide a continent-wide transparency on price and business models, and make a competitive traction among the projects to finance the most feasible and the best projects of all of them. So thanks a lot. I still have a lot to say, but I cut here, and I'm open, and I hope it's going to be a nice discussion with you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much, Figgis, for those insights. I request Anurag Rakesh sir to please come and launch the cross-boundary report, and also request everyone who is involved in the report to come and launch it. So the context is that Kritika from Cross Boundary, based on the National Hydrogen Mission, has estimated the total amount of investment which goes almost for $100 billion. And since the dependency is on RE sources, around 125 gigawatts of electrolyzers, and this is one of the most exhaustive report till now. May I request everyone to So I request you to open the report and Kritika, please come and give some insights for the USAID SAREP report. Thanks.
Great. I'll wait for the deck to come up. Great. Hi, everyone. Keerthi Kachala here from Cross Boundary. Very excited for the launch of this report that we've been working on with the SAREP team for the last few months. And it's a pretty long report, more than 80 pages, so do take the time to review it. But we did want to share some key insights from the report, key takeaways that we learned as we engage with several stakeholders in the sector. So just to quickly dive into it, setting the context a bit first. So why did we write this report? It's because we do think that India is a very high potential market for green hydrogen. And the reason we think that is there are a few key driving factors that make a market interesting for the sector. It's mainly the availability of renewable energy sources that's needed to produce this green hydrogen. It's strong to bring down the costs. It is the strong demand from domestic or potentially exports, as well as a strong enabling environment. And what we've seen in India with the National Green Hydrogen Mission, as well as the key stakeholders, is that you're seeing strength in all these areas. India has nearly 170 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, some of the lowest tariffs in the world, below 3 cents per kilowatt hours. A strong push to ramp up local electrolyzer supply, strong setup of production hubs to provide infrastructure support around the entire facility, as well as strong demand side factors being one of the top 5 demand centers for oil refining, ammonia consumption, as well as steel production. And lastly, also a key location for strong export markets, given that we do expect demand to come from neighboring countries like Japan and South Korea. This is paired with a very strong government push, as was just highlighted, very ambitious targets for us to reach, and a strong need for investment in this space, with the goal of really driving down the price of green hydrogen. As was mentioned, the prices today are quite high relative to gray hydrogen, starting at $4 and above, versus green hydrogen close to about $1 in a base case. So the goal of the mission is really to get green hydrogen to be cost competitive, with a goal of $2.5 per kg by 2025 and $1 per kg by 2030 to truly make it competitive with gray hydrogen and make the decision to use this very easy for users. So moving on to what has been the reaction from the key stakeholders as a result of this. The Green Hydrogen Mission was in development since 2021, but really launched earlier this year. And what we've seen is that there's been a very strong positive reaction from both public and private sector parties. The public sector has been focused on running pilot projects to build capacity, both from the technology as well as the economic side. You've seen this across many pilot projects that are detailed in the report, including the Leh blending project. On the private sector, the priority has been to set up and develop large-scale facilities, working with local governments and states and signing MOUs. And in addition, we are seeing joint developments for local electrolyzer manufacturing, combining the technology of international firms as well as the capacity of domestic firms. However, as again highlighted earlier, a key risk remains the demand center for this. So how do you secure offtake for projects? So where do we expect this demand to come from? We think that there's going to be really three driving industries to this. And the reason is the readiness of the sectors to actually take up green hydrogen, as well as the ability for them to absorb the higher costs that are today, although something that is expected to come down. And this is expected to really be in the refining and natural gas sector. And a main reason being that hydrogen represents only 2 to 4% of the costs for these sectors. So they are able to absorb a higher price today. And they want to invest in bringing down that price over time. Another key demand center is expected to be ammonia. Obviously, it is a strategic sector for India, given agriculture-based economy. And the government's goal for us to be independent from importing and sort of be self-sufficient for ammonia manufacturing, and hydrogen is a key input to that. And lastly, exports are also meant to be a part of our demand centers, as we are targeting capturing 10% of global exports, given our proximities to some of the demand hubs. What does this mean in terms of investment needed? So the National Hydrogen Mission estimates nearly $100 billion of funding needed for achieving these ambitious goals. Obviously, there are various assumptions underlying that, which you can obviously read in more detail in the report. But what's really interesting here is that nearly 60 to 70% of the actual demand is going to come from needing to invest into more renewable energy capacity, given the investment needed and the amount of energy that would be needed for this sector. Something that India is very familiar with. That's a very mature sector. So we do expect this to be met by financiers for the sector. So moving on to who are the financiers and who do we expect to be driving this investment? There are a few different buckets based on risk tolerance, based on the types of capital, based on the amount of capital. So in the first bucket, we have development finance institutions, many of whom are here today and are very active across various sectors, the likes of IFC, Proparco, DFC. And what their ability here is to take higher risks and to be able to invest in the early stage of projects, which is where a lot of projects are today, and provide both long-term as well as lower cost financing. In the next bucket, and a lot of these players have mentioned their interest in India and interest in engaging with developers that have projects that they're developing as well as structuring. So we're happy to connect later and make those introductions as would make sense. In the next bucket, we have domestic and international commercial banks. So obviously, $100 billion is a lot of money, and that cannot be met by the DFIs alone. The domestic and international banks represent pretty large balance sheets and ability to finance a lot of this project. However, they are not as risk tolerant as the DFIs. And so they are expected to require support from the DFIs and really come in as these sectors become more mature and some of the technology risk is taken out of the mix. We also expect the export credit agencies to play a big role here, given that their goal is to increase and support producers of this technology, which are currently abroad. So lots of interest from Germany, from the UK, from Korea, as well as supporting equity investments from these markets. And lastly, given the amount of financing needed, we do expect capital markets to play a large role here, with green bonds being an option. However, this would need to only happen again once the business model is mature, cash flows can be predicted. So more of a later stage investment, but something to keep an eye out for, as the massive amounts of financing will require public markets to be able to meet it. Moving on to what we've seen as some of the key risks, and as mentioned earlier, also trying to focus on some solutions on how do we actually address these key risks. So one key risk is that a lot of these projects, as I mentioned, are in very early stage. The technology is still evolving. It isn't necessarily standardized. And so the development phase is where we see the highest risk, and a lot of projects are still at that MOU phase. And what we've seen work in this market is project preparation facilities, often by these DFIs, that allow project developers to access high risk capital that can be used to develop some of these feasibility studies, de-risk some of these projects, and be able to progress it to a later stage where commercial banks and longer term capital is interested in investing. A few other key risks that again was mentioned before as well. Price and volume is a key risk. So really stimulating the demand centers is going to be key. We have seen quite a lot of interest from the supply side. And the key goal here and how we see this being mitigated, and we're seeing this in the National Hydrogen Mission, is by setting industry mandates where industry will need to at least use a set percentage of their demand to come from not gray but green hydrogen, driving that demand, and supported also by incentives, including both on the demand as well as the supply side, to bring that cost down for it to be economically viable for these industries to actually adopt this. Another concern is on the interface risk. So with green hydrogen projects, what's different from renewable energy is there are many different components to a project. There is renewable energy, there's the electrolyzer, there is desalination, storage and transportation. And so as these technologies interface, that risk needs to be protected. And so there are mechanisms by structuring contracts in a strong way, having wrap guarantees, having liquidated damage facilities. So both financial as well as legal ways to protect against this. And lastly, a strong regulatory framework is going to be key. So there is really no difference when you look at gray and green hydrogen. They don't look different. They are essentially the same, but how it's manufactured is what the difference is. And so strong certification and regulatory environment that aligns with global standards is going to be important, particularly as export is part of our demand center as well. So I'll stop there. There's a lot more in the report, but wanted to give you some key takeaways and excited for you all to dig into it. Thanks very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Kritika. Thank you, Rajesh, for an excellent presentation. It's time for now a panel discussion, and then we'll have the question and answer session after the panel discussion. I'd like to start. I've been already introduced. I'm Vishwanath, Chief Executive of Greenstat Hydrogen India, working in India and Sri Lanka. I would like to start by telling that you have an excellent panel. Congratulations to USAID and SAREP for putting up this panel. If you look at the value chain, right from definition of what is green hydrogen and certification, and then the supply chain of electrolyzers or storage systems, and of course the project development, financing, and end use. So every segment of the value chain is covered here on the dais. I'm only a moderator. I'll be like integrating all the parts and also trying to ask the relevant and most important questions we all in mind, and then leave it to the audience to do that. I would like to introduce Mr. Bimal, who is head of Green Hydrogen and Green Energy Department in L&T, to give an overview first and specific to challenges which are in the sector, and then we can have the discussion. Bimal, yeah.
Thank you, Vishwanath. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank USAID, SAREP, and RTI International for this session. I think Frigas and Kritika has captured nicely the overview of the global market on the hydrogen side. If I look from the India perspective, India has set a 5 million metric tons target for green hydrogen. And now with the green hydrogen mission, we are talking about 10 million ton, where 5 million will go towards export. I think it's pretty massive target, but it's a right move towards decarbonization and net zero goals, which we, India as a country, want to achieve. I saw, the pricing difference, which Kritika has also highlighted. But if we look into the larger aim of this green hydrogen mission is to make India as a energy independent country. The way I look into, yes, the pricing difference is going to be there. So if we look into, India has made a significant progress. The way I look into, I'm in the renewable sector for almost a decade. And when I see the other sectors, solar, wind, and compare green hydrogen, the one thing which clearly distinguish for us in India that we are moving along with the world at the same time, at the same pace. Nothing major or significant has happened in the world which we are not talking in India. India is talking about green hydrogen hubs. The government has identified a couple of ports to work on that. We are talking about uh, a PLI program, which also has initiated the site programs on the production of hydrogen, the site program on the electrolyzer PLI. I think, there's a lot of things has been moved up, which is working on. Like Vishnu said, if I look into the major challenge for us to implement green hydrogen is the cost. If we look into, there is a massive delta between gray hydrogen and green hydrogen. The gray hydrogen, as everyone knows, that is produced through natural gas, and it may be almost 50%. I think figure said it's $6, €6. I will not go whether it's 5 or 6, but the numbers are almost 50% in case of gray. To implement that, we need to definitely have some support in the initial phase, like what has happened in solar. If we look into, we are talking about 18 rupees, or let's say, I'm talking about 20 to 30 US cents if you take care of exchange rate. And now we're talking 3 cents of solar power today, which is extremely competitive, even lower than our conventional power. Hydrogen is almost at the similar stage which solar was 15 years ago. Now, the government has supported in the initial phase, and we become extremely competitive. The same thing need to happen in the hydrogen space. How hydrogen can become competitive? There are like couple of points. One, definitely the initial support from the government to give some incentives or viability gap funding. Second, technology is also going to play a major role. If we look into the turbines or panels, they have evolved from 100 watt peak to 600 watt peak plus. If we talk about the electrolyzers, they are like few hundred kilowatt to 4 or 5 megawatt, and people are still evolving. There's not much of major manufacturing setup in place, although people are working on that, but there's a massive delta between demand and supply. If you talk to the any electrolyzer manufacturer today, they will typically take roughly 2 years, 3 years, 1.5 years, this kind of supply time or delivery time they're talking, which shows this sector need to be moved up. The second, on the technology side, on the efficiency side, rather than the cost, the efficiencies are going to play a major role, is going to help the cost coming down. In the green hydrogen, 60 to 70% cost comes from RE power. Now, if we look into RE power is at 3 cents, with the technology improvement, while it has dropped significantly, I think it will go further down. That will also help to bring the green hydrogen cost down. So there's the electrolyzer, which need to be improved on the efficiency, on the cost. Then there's the RE power, which if you look historically, it's already dropping, right? The third factor will be economies of scale. Right now, people are talking about few megawatt, kilowatt. Yes, there are some global big project has been announced, but if you look into FID has not happened for most of the project. They are in the feasibility stage. To kickstart those projects, it will need a lot of effort and the complete ecosystem from electrolyzer to RE to evacuation to port infrastructure, everything need to be in place. I will say the the commercials on this side is going to be one of the big challenge. But if I look from the logistic perspective or transportation or production, the way I look into handling of hydrogen is not a challenge, but transportation of hydrogen is a big challenge. The way it is going to evolve initially, the way we see the use cases, the hydrogen need to be produced next to the consumers. However, if you look ammonia globally, we're talking about 180 million tons of ammonia produced, and out of which 20 million tons of ammonia is getting traded every year. So we have a very good ecosystem. Even India is importing between 2.5 million tons of ammonia every year. So I think that ecosystem is there. We just need to continue the path which we are doing. The government is also very positive. There are a lot of push. There are a lot of task force has been set up. I think if we continue this drive in next couple of years, we'll be competitive and bring green hydrogen at par with grey. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think you have covered most of the points. There'll be one or two questions, particularly on the challenges of achieving the price point, which is viable to the industry. So ultimately, it is the industry is going to consume at what price. So, from the policy and regulatory, see what industry needs is policy and regulatory certainty, number one, and bankability of the agreements on the sale side. We have seen from the solar experience, wind experience. So I think you have any comments on what the government should be doing, like regulation versus open market, government support up to what period of time, and then not getting into like what we have seen, bringing reverse e-bidding and all those things into a place where the industry is yet to stand on its own. So anything on the government policies to reduce the price and the sustainability point of view, any inputs from your side?
Yeah, so a couple of quick points. One, I think government is already making a lot of movements. The site program is already in place where we are talking about 19,744 crore, or let's say close to $2.5 billion sort of funding. However, I think if I look from one challenge perspective, they are talking about this incentives. I'm talking only in the production side, not on the manufacturing side, only for 3 years, which can be one of the challenge for the industry, as these plants typically have life. The RE assets will have life of 25, 30 years. And if you look into ammonia and electrolyzer plants can have similar life with the replacement of stacks. So I think that need to be seen. Second, the major consumers is refineries, fertilizers, and fertilizers are highly subsidized in India. So there's no direct motivation for them to use green hydrogen, which is not cost competitive. And refineries are again, having challenge on the petroleum product prices, right? So we need to see how government can support these sectors to kickstart the demand. The demand creation is going to be one of the major challenge. And I think we need to see. But on the same time, export can be extremely competitive for us from India, where we have a good land, we have good resources in terms of solar and wind. We can get a equally competitive financing because it's going to be international export in dollars. And again, I think the taxes duties which increase the cost in India will not be applicable in case of export. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just add on the export point, a very valid point made that competition, India can compete with other countries, definitely. I'll not bring the blue hydrogen point here because we are discussing about green hydrogen. We need to be very, very careful about the other product which will be more competitive, but how our strategies will be to win over that and convince the importing countries to get into green hydrogen straight away rather than getting into something different. And again, this one and other things, of course, is the certification and definition is so important when we call about it is the importing country standards which will be important there to be export the product, not our thing. So we have to be very, very careful about quickly moving into the international standardization having thing. Third and final, I would like to say is there are many type of players in India. You are seeing from the presentation also. There'll be large players, there'll be niche players, there'll be medium, startup players, and also I think it's time for us to categorize very clearly, bring out the opportunity document through government and a partnership with the private industry. What are the opportunities for each segment? Maybe the large players can have large plants for export point of view and meeting the government requirement and other things. There is the other requirement of heat replacement industries. I'm talking about ceramic industries, glass industries, pharmaceuticals. I think that if you start somewhere good, because there is a replacement cost of natural gas, the natural gas price which hits the roof sometimes, also the natural gas availability, and of course the CO2 content. The whole thing starts with the CO2 angle also. If you can replace totality on that and put hydrogen as a blending, because and do some studies on the burner management system or on the furnace and other things, I think we have starting somewhere at the 5, 10, 15 megawatt and module increase, and the industry which is the middle industry which can start, because we need not tell industry, we have to have the rules and regulations, lay it and clear it. Don't put pressure of $2.5 or $3, $5. Industry will evolve itself on what price, because the supplier and the demand, they will be looking at themselves. Have the certainty of the policy and have the very clarity and trajectory and support them in the requirement. And wherever it is generated should be used there first, because transport and we know the storage cost is almost equivalent to the cost of generation or production. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I just heard my words. I will request Mr. Manjunatha to provide his views on the whole industry and particularly on the standardization.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vishwanath. It's really great pleasure to see that the standards have been discussed at the very initial stage. While we are at the green hydrogen, where we are starting, I mean, while the hydrogen is being already used, but we are starting it now. And I I go back to 12 years back when the solar was a rage, everyone talked about, but there was no clue about what standards and how the performance has to be measured, how the safety has to be measured, how do we make sure that these projects which we are using are going to be safe, secure, and sustainable? So I'm very happy that you're bringing up this here at the very initial stage. And overall, global market is still evolving, I should say, in terms of the standards when it comes to, there are few standards, very few standards when it comes to the electrolyzing. UL has developed few standards on the electrolyzing, dispensing. However, there is a huge requirement which really needs to be done. Just a study which I did, which shows me that there is fuel cell and fuel specification. There are 1 and 6 standards, around 7 standards all put together. And on the dispensing side, there are 4 standards. Safety standards are yet evolving, where it particularly talks about the definitions, terminologies, not going into what really needs to be addressed in the system. So which means to say there is a huge potential while we are talking about the project, while we are talking about the potential for hydrogen, there is a huge potential for us to work towards developing the standards. And definitely, as we are talking about the globalization, it's important for us to harmonize, work together in terms of developing the standards rather than waiting for ourselves to do something. Let's collaborate, work together, and develop the standards. So just to give you an example, again, UL Standards and Engagement Team, we have been working very closely with the various national standardization bodies like BIS2 to harmonize standards which are going to be putting effort at the one go rather than multiple people doing the same thing, reinventing the whole wheel. So here, this is an opportunity for all the national standardization bodies, the international standards bodies coming together. ISO, the pace at which the things happen, it is really takes a lot of time. What I would really look at is, can India become the leader? Yes, definitely. Only thing is we need right collaboration, people coming together, right stakeholders coming together, and taking up this act that is required for us to make India successful by 2047. What we are talking about, and also 2070 being carbon neutral. With that, I would also like to say that while standards are being developed, I think that is the next question you would have. Let me answer it now itself. Well, how are we going to implement, how are we going to make sure that the certifications or the testing is being done? As I said, probably the testing organizations have not yet established any testing facility across. It's high time. Once we have some standards, definitely the testing organizations and certifications would come. And again, having one certification which can be accepted, if we have one standard, which can be used or which can be developed. So I think this is a right time for us. And ULSE, the UL Standards and Engagement team here to support and collaborate, bring new standards together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, please, Mr. Arnie, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Aryan Juvilar, and I am a business developer lead for HDF Energy, which has recently entered the Indian market. We're an IPP founded in France a decade ago, and we have recently, expanded around the world in the past few decades, and we're currently present in 7 countries in Southeast Asia, and India being, the seventh South Asian country that has been added to our list. So thank you very much for having me on your panel today. Could you please let me know what the question is? Mhm.
First of all, very happy. Some sort of global experience of Zimbabwe and Indonesia. You can
Yes,
do something.
absolutely. So before entering India, as I said, we've been present in almost every continent around the world. And just to talk a little bit about our short experience in India for the moment. So at the risk of disagreeing potentially with a couple of my fellow panelists, um, I I and HDF Energy, we do believe that green hydrogen to power solutions are possible to implement today around the globe. And we've spent the past decade making that happen. And for the past few months, our ambition has been to bring our solutions to the Indian and South Asian market in general, and to collaborate with local stakeholders and players in order to co-develop green hydrogen to power projects. So the first thing that we understand, and as has been mentioned by previous panelists, India is a very price-sensitive market, and green hydrogen remains extremely expensive today. So what we're doing is that we're trying to target areas where the cost of electricity is already quite high, such as edge of grid areas, microgrids, places where the grid has inherent weaknesses in providing round the clock for renewable power, areas and economic sectors where, for example, diesel gensets are excessively used as power backups. And we want to co develop projects with local partners, sourcing locally as much as possible. And so hydrogen solutions remain a little expensive for India for obvious reasons that were stated earlier. But we've discovered that coupled with the other benefits, hydrogen to power solutions can remain cost competitive. So in Zimbabwe, for instance, our experience taught us that some of the most reliable co-developing partners are state-owned utilities. So this is a strategy that bore fruit recently when we signed an MOU with Zimbabwe's electricity transmission and distribution company last month. So this will be for the Middle Sabi Renew Stable hydrogen power plant project, which will provide round-the-clock power feeding into the main grid with an annual electricity production of 178 gigawatt hours, providing electricity to almost 3 lakh people, providing 40 megawatts a day and 6 megawatts a night. And the project has been, agreed upon in every way, and the construction should start next year, hopefully. And from our experience in Indonesia, we followed a very similar, kind of partnership strategy um, as in other markets. And most recently, we were fortunate enough to be able to sign an MOU with Indonesia's PTPLN, which is the country's lead, power utility company, to develop 20 green hydrogen to power projects across Indonesia. Our older pipeline of projects in Indonesia is well under development in the Sumba region. And our goal there is to provide firm round the clock baseload power of at least 20 megawatts per per power plant. So this has kind of been our global experience around the world, notably with regards to the kinds of partners and co-developers that we choose as an IPP from the private sector, who still has every aspect of sustainable development in mind.
Just one more last question. Uh, we all know that hydrogen has been till now a protected environment in refineries or maybe in petrochemicals. I can be able to call hydrogen as a naughty child. Now it's going to come to on the road. I mean, it's going to be transported heavily. Then volumes what we are looking going to industry and other things. So it will be crisscrossing on the roads. It will be storage also will be very high quantity storage. From the countries where you have been working, on some points on storage regulations and transport regulations, anything if you can throw some light on that will help a lot for India.
Right, for sure. So we have had, quite a bit of experience since we've been constructing green hydrogen power plants for the past decade. Storing and transportation has come up as a very important issue, and so that's one of the reasons why one of our main solutions, the Renew Stable solution, combines a hydrogen production site with the energy storage site that is situated extremely close to the off-taker site as well, the off-taker grid. So first of all, geographical proximity in order to avoid, long haul transport of this extremely volatile, extremely dangerous gas, or at the risk of making it less dangerous, we would have to, compromise on its purity levels, etc. So there's a huge, what I've noticed is that there's a huge necessity of international cooperation to set universal standards, regarding hydrogen color, purity, and as well as with storage and compression standards. Because, for example, the standard H2 storage in France and Europe is at 30 bars. But I've encountered much, much higher compression levels in India. Um, there are some issues with other, storage and safety standards as well, where, for example, in India, we're not allowed to store compressed hydrogen in stacked cylinders, and that presents a whole new challenge regarding, the surface area of the hydrogen production plant. So yeah, that creates a space problem. Just lastly, so RGH2 power plants, produce on site, as I said, to avoid kind of not only the perils but the unpreparedness of our pipelines. And just as a fun fact. So currently, we kind of have two projects in development in France and in Morocco, respectively, that is exploring the option of underground hydrogen storage, which we do believe is the future of hydrogen storage. So whether that be in cylinders or natural salt caverns have also presented very, very high potential recently. Thank
Thank
you.
you. As per me, green hydrogen is a tale of two factors: capacity utilization factor and of the source, and loading factor of the electrolyzer. I think if these two factors are addressed, I think in addition to the number of years of support from the government and the policies and other things, because they are huge, and 6 hour, 8 hour solar power based standalone hydrogen versus a 14 to 16 hour based uh, potential renewable energy input, we can see the costs and how it behaves, and impact will have on the storage. So I'd like to have a question on the RE/RTC angle. If somebody from the panel can mention that.
No, I think, Vishwanath, you raised a very important question. I did not try to cover it. I kept it high level. So in the green hydrogen cost, 70%, like I said, is the RE cost. Now, if you look into the solar CUF, it's, between 25 to 30%. If you look into the wind, I'm talking India, my friends from Europe will definitely have higher PLFs, that is again varies between 35 to 45% depending upon the sites and other factors. So you're not getting 24/7 power. If you look into the refineries operation, they need hydrogen on continuous basis. If you look into ammonia plant, again, they need continuous supply of hydrogen to produce ammonia. Storage of hydrogen is one of the big challenge because of their density. They're like 5x, more than natural gas. And again, storage has its own issues with hydrogen. No one has tried to store the quantum which we're talking in the million tons, right? So until this piece of puzzle is solved through the hybrid RE plants or RTC RE plants, it will not happen. Even if we talk about solar and wind standalone, we're talking about close to 60% PLF stroke CUF. So that means you need to go to 80 or 100%. Government has tried to support. Last year, they declared that 30 days banking in the grid will be available, which is one of the very good step. And I think it can take care of the RTC power at a much competitive rates. If you go directly from renewable to supply, then you need a storage. The battery energy storage solutions are still not very competitive. The government is trying to support. The pumped storage is again picking up, which is more competitive than BESS, but again, still not that competitive to make it attractive, right? And again, they will not be able to reach to 100%. So this banking is one of the solutions which people are working. The battery storage need to be definitely come down. The pump storage is one solution. Again, hydro plants can also pitch in. Unfortunately, so these three factors until fixed, the cost of RE is not going to come down. If you're going to operate your electrolyzers at 50-60%, it means you're oversizing your electrolyzers. If you go to ammonia, the challenge is a bit more. So you again need to make your ammonia plants much bigger. And your utilities, your capex, opex, everything, transfer into that. So I think RTC power is going to be one of the key factor. There are solutions being worked out. There are different storage solutions. I've spoken about two, but there are multiple other solutions being worked out. Banking to start with is being spoken. We'll see how that can happen. I will just take the numbers which Kritika mentioned in the report, 125 gigawatt of RE power required. We are talking 400 gigawatt grid in India. Can we store this kind of power? We cannot. It may be possible to do banking while, as a developer, as an investor, I aspire to have the banking. We need to see practically how you can store it. So that is going to be another challenge which we need to watch it. I think it need to evolve. The cost of the storage solution need to come down to make it practically viable. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Thank you.
I just would like to grab the word on your last sentence. I am very sure that all of the cost is going to go down. That's for sure. Definitely. The question is when. And if you see the analogies of other industries or just as you mentioned solar power development for the last decade, like 20 years ago, it was just unimaginable that you see every rooftop solar panels. Now it's everywhere. So and it took about 20 years to really just spread out. Um, I always just fall into this simple mistake that I would like to solve the problem next year. I have a project in front of me. I have to play around the Excel modeling how it will work, and it doesn't. I try the other way around, and it doesn't. And of course, there is a lot of tricks that we need just some bridge financing or securing the price fixing for a couple of years. But the problem with that we are going to spoil the off-takers if we provide that gap between the competitiveness and the. I believe that we should be a little bit more patient and wait for the technology to come. We have in our projects a lot of startups providing fascinating solution for storage for transportation, which is going to be a major part of the cost of hydrogen. This will come. We just would like to run and rush, but can you just imagine that this discussion could not happen 10 years ago because nobody. So I think the shift has already happened, and all of the projects which we are seeing, we have a large project in Asia, development of 40 gigawatt solar and wind combined power with a potential for doubling it production just for hydrogen production. So these kind of big projects will come. It's still in the pre-feasibility phase, or not even the feasibility phase, but this size and economy of scale, and when the electrolyzer producers, the technology producers, the innovative startups for storage, for conversion, for transportation see there is a huge market evolving, it will bring up the ideas, the solutions, and it will happen in the next 5 years that we see some technological breakthrough and the price will significantly drop. What we cannot allow is now compete with the old technology because it's not a fair competition. It just not the right way to do that. Kritika, would you like?
Yeah, sure. Just two quick points on RTC. I think one, it's also going to be really important to have more regional integration across our countries. So, Nepal does have a goal of having excess power that they can export through hydro, but the interconnection between Nepal and India is still not there, right? And it's something that's been spoken about for many years. But I know the SAREP program is also, taking initiatives to try to connect the region a lot more. And so I do think the more we can integrate, the more we can be more efficient across the regions, the more we can take advantage of that massive renewable energy base load that is in the north for us. And then I think the second point that's going to be important is around standards, right? So, maybe India allows for 30 days of banking, but is that going to be a standard that's accepted globally? And is that counted as green hydrogen in other markets? And so that's where international standards and unifying everything will be important. Otherwise, it won't qualify to be able to export as well. So just a few other factors we have to think about too.
Correct point. In fact, banking, as we know, India, I have been for the last 30 years at least, NTPC or PTC or KPMG, we have been discussing about distribution company. We have to not forget the person who is directly involved and serving us day in, day out. There are issues there, not only the technical issues and the commercial issues. Any 50 paise more burden on the distribution company, we know what going to happen. Already, very difficulty distribution companies have come to some stage. So if you put a burden of hydrogen on them and then the banking, which they cannot do. So in the concurrent list, when things are there, I think the policies have to be very clear that if we are pushing banking as one of the major things, better take the inputs from the state governments and the distribution companies, the happening of that or not. Because already state governments are telling that whoever asks for less banking, they will award the contract to them. So if this is so on one side, and other side, we are telling a massive projects have to come based on banking, and that becomes a viability for us to export green ammonia. I think we have to, in this whole process of the chain, to be very careful on what should be the element where we should focus. I think focusing on indigenization of electrolyzers, pushing the cost down, scalability, and other things are there, but on certain things where distribution companies involved and we are supposed to bank on them for banking, I think it's a thing which we have to really think and go forward. Also, as rightly mentioned by Kritika, the banking, the certification by giving by SLDC or RLDC is such that it should be acceptable as a green energy. Otherwise, it becomes a stock where we cannot sell that much of quantity, I believe, as grey energy stamped, and we'll be losing out. Other thing what I have seen in last few years on renewable energy, the integration of renewable energy is so important. Of course, hydrogen has come as a very good boon to the renewable energy because we are able to think of increasing the capacity to meet the renewable energy. But the same renewable energy, if you take a state like Andhra or any other state, the capacity available is so high, they are going for curtailment. If the area control error can be increased, I mean, area can be increased, or regional can be based on the RE, and above that, like USAID is doing, the cooperation of this region in our Asian region, if it is taken as a bigger thing, I think even the International Solar Alliance's inputs can be taken. And then we can make one sun, one world point of view, and also the state load dispatch center should be giving up, and RLDC should be giving up that NLDC level. If we are doing the allocation of the renewable energy, I think that becomes very important because many industries are putting complementary of wind in 5 states and clubbing that together and telling that we can give higher REC, capacity factor, utilization factor. If industry is coming out of that and the NLDC is in your control, I think doing that at the NLDC level will give a lot, and that will make our country competitive. Please look at as a country level what all the 5 things we should do to make it competitive, not at the state level. Because state level, if you do, you are curtailing it unnecessarily and you are not reaching the limit. That 5 things which country level and southeastern region level, if you have to do these boxes, if you are ticking, you will find the solution to make India a very good competitive environment without wasting the renewable energy. This is what I had to say as well.
Just one concluding remark, Vishwanath. While we are talking about all the cost, everything, what is going to be most important is making sure that whatever that we are doing is safe. The moment, yeah, and it is globally accepted. The standards have to be evolved, which are globally acceptable. There's one standard, one testing, one certification. Probably that would be the best solution for us to look at. And India can definitely take the lead because they have enough resources, the subject matter experts, and the system which is being already there. It's only the leadership which has to be taken, and organization like ours definitely can help in taking that forward. Thank you.
So,
Yeah. I just want to add what Manjunath and Vishnu said. I think the definition of green hydrogen and green ammonia is going to play a major role. If you look, ammonia and hydrogen has been traded more of a short-term or spot market contracts. They are not long-term. And the REPPAs are typically long-term contracts. So there is going to be paradigm shift here. And if we are going to produce something in India, we call it green. And when we go to Europe, they will not accept it as a green. It is going to be a big challenge, or vice versa in Asia or US. So there need to be a single standard for hydrogen and ammonia. The definition should not change. If it is going to change, it can be detrimental for investors' interest. I think that is going to be one of the crucial points. Like Europe has come up with some of the guidelines, which is saying that if you're producing between that particular period, consuming that period within 3 months period, and that again up to 28, only then it's green. You cannot change the infrastructure of green hydrogen or green ammonia after 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It is going to last for 25 years. What you're going to do with that infrastructure which you have created, and it's a capex. More than 90% you are investing in capex. OPEX is minuscule in the full value chain. So the assets will become a liability. So I think this is going to be the need of hour. I think it is being spoken at all international forums within India. A lot of work is happening, but this definition clarity need to come sooner before people start getting into the investment mode. And I just want to add one thing. Figas said we need to be patient. I was a kid. I was in the school. I saw one documentary. It says that cars are going to run on water. And I was wondering that time, and now I can correlate. It said they're going to extract hydrogen and make it run. And I was like, kid, I said, come on, we have more than 70% water. Why we're not running? Why we need to pay for the petrol? And they said it's commercially not viable. I was school going kid. I said, I can't understand why it can't happen. But after years now, I'm correlating that the things are happening and cost is still a challenge. Yeah. 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 I still remember that documentary. It's interesting. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, just last one. I think the diversity of the subject of hydrogen is so much. It's not just the energy department or power department or any MNRE issue. I think it's much wider than many departments are involved. Oil and gas is involved, agriculture is involved, and other things are there. From biomass point of view, I think not jump the gun, but a point I want to put in the mind is it time to have an hydrogen authority of India, encompassing and everything else, and having that authority like what NHA has achieved or what airport authority has achieved, something like that, encompassing everything, which is a vital body. You can rename whatever committee it's there, but that that view which is reporting to a planning commission or a PMO or what it may be, I think the mission mode it has to be done. Otherwise, having individually doing certain valleys or some things like that may come in, but it's a time. 2050 is not far away. It's just 25 years. I was in this hall in 1980. Today, how many years you see? I'm discussing about PPAs of thermal plants. So 25 years will just pass. So 2050 is round the corner. Let's not see 2005 is far away. I think there's a mission mode and war mode. We have to do something on the national authority of, I mean, it should be a hydrogen authority of India, HAI, high. I think something like that. Unless
Manjanath ji,
something is like that is not there, I think it'll all be a.
so Vishwanath ji, maybe if audience has some questions,
Yes.
yeah, that
Now I'll leave it to the audience. Please, thanks. Thank you.
Yes, I have a basic question regarding that we are seeing that, as far as hydrogen is concerned, the logistics, the supply chains, the entire, ecosystem innovations are not that very robust. We are too much dependent on China, for example, for electric vehicles, for photovoltaics, for solar energy. Same for hydrogen, countries like France and Canada basically are doing, but they are not building the things at the global scale so that, I mean, the innovations both at the demand side and the supply side can be taken forward. So how do you see that that we have to make the supply chains, expand them towards the local level, so that this thing can I mean can pick up, the ecosystem can develop for the long run. Thanks very much.
No, I think you're absolutely right. The ecosystem is going to play a critical role, and in the RE sector, we are heavily dependent on China. However, if you look into on the electrolyzer side, India is taking a lot of initiative. Like I said, there is a side program where 4,500 crore is earmarked to promote the manufacturing in the electrolyzer sector. The China definitely, is a manufacturing hub. I will not say that we can ignore them. They are still, moving big pieces. They are already having few gigawatt manufacturing capacities. On the same time, India is also making big moves, including L&T getting to the manufacturing. I think we have not seen that kind of momentum from the initial phase of any technology which is being, evolved. In the RE sector, we are pretty late, but in the hydrogen side, India will be definitely having good pie in the manufacturing side, and the other countries are also pitching in after this Russia-Ukraine war. The people want to diversify; they don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. So I think the different supply chain in different countries are being planned. The way we look into, I believe even on the ammonia side, if you look into the licensors, the major licensors are not from China. Yes, China also has the licenser, so it's also pretty much diversified, and it's happening for pretty long decades. Yeah.
Mr. Rakesh.
Yeah, thank you. I I don't have questions, so don't worry. I have only the comment to make. And I saw 70% cost for the generating green hydrogen is from the RE, and RE cost is one of the issues. But my experiences says that of course the immediate solution can be the banking, but that cannot be a lasting solution because of the discom viabilities and the capacity, technical capacity of the grid itself. But RTC, I will tell you, is a very, very promising solution. Recently, we did a tender for Indian Railways of 1 gigawatt, and the prices was around 4 rupees per unit only. So that's a market response to that. If you look at the cost, 4 rupees RTC power renewable available versus the commercial cost, which is otherwise available, is 6-7 rupees. So in fact, that will help in terms of reducing the cost of the generation. And why is the cost coming on the RTC side lower is that because of the two reasons. A, the batteries cost is coming down, also because of the pump storage. The challenge of the pump storage was that it has a long time to build the cycle, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We recently worked with the Karnataka, which wanted to generate pump storage for 1 gigawatt. And they were very, very apprehensive about the timelines and whether the bidder will come at all or not. We provided them the confidence that we also make some specification changes in their bids, like making them blow 100 megawatt at different locations. Now, the lot of bids have come. The contract has also been awarded. And those manufacturers are telling us that they will try to complete it within 3 years. The stipulated timeline is 4 years. So the pump storage cycle time for the generating that pump storage capacity is getting down, which will help. The cost of the battery will help, which will lead to a lower cost of the RTC power, which will really help the hydrogen production. That's right.
Thank you. Any more questions? So, any other questions if there are? I think this is the last one. Huh?
Yeah,
So
good
maybe
morning.
so you can talk offline. Yeah.
So we're already giving the different kind of color to the hydrogen. So like green, blue, gray. How will you really differentiate any mechanism? Like at the end of the day, it's a H2. It does not really matter where the electrons comes and generate hydrogen and oxygen from the water. But when you will be store it as a ammonia, so maybe from the green hydrogen. So how you really differentiate this kind of hydrogen? This is a green, this is a gray, this is other thing. Is any mechanism is there?
I think that is where the question that we're talking about is how do we define? Because definition becomes the primary thing for us to say. Otherwise, hydrogen is hydrogen, right? And definitely the impetus why we are looking at green hydrogen is making, not putting pressure back onto the environment, right? So that is where the definition becomes an important aspect, and the standards become an important aspect.
I will go a bit. Certification is the end product. Somebody putting a stamp and telling you. I think behind certification, what is important, I'll tell you, is the state load dispatch center certifying that that energy for that number of hours has been sourced from either solar or wind or biomass, and going back to them through the metering system and proving it. I think some systems like blockchain and other things have to come in so that nobody can manipulate or do anything. I think there is a lot of integration between IT and OT also in that, which has to parallelly develop, because certification is only a stamp, which can be again like in India, anything can be. So we have to have that blockchain way of certifying and telling that yes, the movement the electron has been from the wind or solar has been the production of this.
I think last comment from Friglis here on this
Yeah,
one.
just one comment, because this is currently a very hot topic and hot issue. You are absolutely right. It's not a smart idea just to coloring anything, and green is good and blue is not so good, and purple and yellow and so on. Currently, there is an initiative to rename the whole um, phenomenon of what we call good hydrogen or not so good hydrogen, and currently there is a tendency that we are going to call that clean hydrogen, which is coming from renewable sources, and there will be low carbon hydrogen, which is all the other elements. There is, of course, there is a lot of other sources besides coal and solar. We can have some hydrogen from nuclear power plant, which is a very delicate issue how you handle this, because it's no carbon, but it's not renewable. So that's why it should be differentiated. What we call clean, we should agree on, and we have a common understanding, administrative accepted around the globe, and then will be a sufficient manner that we can trade it. But I think that this kind of colorizing, it's not going to survive for a long period of time. Although it's easy to say green is good, but blue is not good. But I'm working for a carbon capturing company. They believe that blue is good, and green is not so. So this is not about the colors. It's about the administrative declaration of standards. And as everywhere, if we are trying to make it administrative viable, then it takes time, and it's a lot of discussion and a lot of interfere from different stakeholders and interest groups. But I hope it's going to be, at least from Europe, we have a very strict guideline to make it fixed by this summer. This is already the second or the third round of discussion and commitment that we are going to have a proper definition for that one.
Okay, thank you so much. I think you have given us a lot to chew for the next several weeks. And with this, I will ask Rakesh sir to come and give a small memento to our panelists and expert speakers.
Thank you very much.
If all of you can just come for a group photo, please. Thank you so much.
Thank next 15 minutes. So